Today we're going to be installing a rear sway bar on the R53 Mini. Originally when I bought this, I had noticed while I was inspecting the brakes how exposed and easy to get to the rear sway bar was. Little did I realize I'm going to have to loosen most of the rear subframe and drop it down a little bit to get the sway bar out. So needless to say, this is going to be a lot more difficult than I originally anticipated. However, because this is one of the best mods you can do to a front wheel drive car, and especially this R53 Mini, I still think it is definitely worth it. I picked up this bar for less than $200. It is a 22mm in diameter solid bar, and of course it also includes new bushings to hold the sway bar down, and they are polyurethane. So this really should give me a lot more control of the back end of the car and help it rotate and turn in well, whether we're autocrossing, track driving, or just enjoying a country road. I've already got the car jacked up off the ground, and I've sprayed everything that I'm going to have to get to with some WD-40 and gave it a little bit of time to sit. I am trying to be optimistic and hoping this is a lot easier than I think it's going to be, but let's see how this goes. Here we are at the driver's side rear of the car. You can see the sway bar right here. So you have easy access to where it connects to the end link. You have easy access to where it bolts to the chassis. You've got a lot of access in here. Problem is, this has to come out somehow. So what you're gonna have to do is there is a 16mm bolt right here, and there is a 16mm bolt directly behind the strut that connects the subframe to the back of the car. Then you're also going to have to disconnect the 16mm nut that holds the end link to the sway bar, the two 13mm bolts that hold it down. There's a 21mm bolt that holds the strut onto the arm here. And then once you connect the two 13mm bolts holding the strut on, and you can drop the strut out of the way, all of this will be disconnected. You'll have this to be able to freely move up and down, and this strut being out of the way will give you room to pull the sway bar out. You have to fish it all the way out and then fish the new one back in. Like I said, I've had everything soaking in penetrating oil, so I don't have to worry about any seized bolts, hopefully. But once we get all that disconnected, we'll fish the bar out, and hopefully it'll go well the first time. I've already disconnected everything on the passenger side of a car. I didn't have any issues breaking anything loose. I didn't have to use my impact wrench on anything except for the lower strut mount, and even then I didn't have to. It's just, it was easy to get to, and I've got my impact wrench out, so I figured why not. There's this interesting little dust cover that goes on the bottom of the strut, so it's facing forward and it's blocking off the head of the bolt that you have to get to. I'm not sure how difficult it's going to be to get this back on, but I'm definitely going to reuse it just to keep rust away. But let's get started disconnecting everything. So with everything disconnected, I have full movement of the sway bar. My problem is this bracket here that comes up off the subframe and then connects to the chassis of the car. We're trying to get a gap right there, and that's what we're gonna snake the bar over and then be able to pull it out and fish the new one back in. So really this hasn't been that bad. It's only taken me about 15 minutes to get all of this undone once the car was up in the air. Everything came out really easy, so if your car's been in the south the whole time, you should not have any issue whatsoever. If you've been up north, it's just a normal struggle for you. As you can see right here, this little bit right here, that is part of a wiring harness for the rear of the car. So just make sure when you're pulling it out that one of the arms right here on the sway bar doesn't catch and yank that wiring harness. So just be careful fishing your way around that. If you have a pry bar, it would be great to pry right here between this gap in the body and pull the subframe down. You can see even just moving it with my body, I can pull it down a little bit. I removed this bolt entirely. The front one I left in mostly, so it's still got a couple of threads left, just so that the whole subframe doesn't come completely out of place. I don't want too much difficulty lining everything back up. So just work with it a little bit, pry at it. It'll be a lot easier if you have a pry bar. If you don't, you can still get it done. I don't have one, and I'm gonna get this bar out. But I'm gonna fight with it a little bit. If I come up with any tips afterwards, I'll let you guys know. But as soon as I come back, the bar should be out and we should be snaking the new one back in. If you're wondering why this is going to make such a big difference, you can just look at how much bigger that bar on top is compared to the one on the bottom. It is a huge difference. You can feel it when you carry them. You can feel it when you hold them. It is a much bigger and stiffer rear sway bar. You can also look at the two brackets that are holding it down. Look how small that factory bracket is. It's almost half the size of the new one, and of course it's polyurethane on the new one and rubber on the old one. So this is going to make a huge difference in how well the car handles. It's going to have a really big impact on the balance of understeer versus oversteer. So I'm really quite excited. Getting it out of the car really wasn't that bad. I did have to end up removing those last couple of threads just on the passenger side. I left the driver's side one in. I would definitely recommend having a pry bar. I had to use the longest wrenches I had, and that worked just fine. I'm going to show you how I fish the new bar back in, and it'll be basically a reverse of what I did to pull the old one out. I thought it was a lot easier to remove the little tie down strap to pull the bar out, so I'm going to put the new tie down on once it's in the car. Be sure to use the provided grease to keep the polyurethane bushing from squeaking. They're much better now than they used to be, but still use the provided grease. It's there and it's not difficult to put on, but definitely wear gloves. It's a very sticky silicone based grease, so it's really hard to get off your hands once it's on there. So the easiest way to fish the bar back in, and the opposite of the way that I fished it out, is to come in from the back with the bar 90 degrees to the way that it should be. And you're going to snake the end past the bracket. And you should be able to get it just past the wiring harness before it's an issue. So now we're past the wiring bracket and the harness. So now it can go straight all the way across until we get to the other bracket. So now the car is up against this bracket on the other side, so I'm going to have to go to that side, pry it down just a little bit to slide the end of the bar over it, and it'll be in place for us to put everything back up. Here on the passenger side, you can see the bar right here up against the bracket. So I'm going to put in my long wrench and pry down so I can get the bar up on top of the bracket and pull. Then coming to the other side, prying down again. And the bar is now all the way through. So all we have to do is put the bracket on the other side, button everything up, and it will be done. So we have the sway bar installed and everything back on the ground. Really, it wasn't that bad. It took a couple of hours to get everything done, especially with filming. But if you know what you're doing and you're comfortable back there, you could probably get the whole thing done in a little bit over an hour, especially if you got lucky like I did and all the bolts came loose pretty easily. This would obviously be a good time to go ahead and do lowering springs or new struts or some other modification while you have everything apart back there. Otherwise, you're just going to take it all apart and put it right back together exactly the way it was. At least you'll become very intimately familiar with how all of the rear suspension on the Mini work, which might come in handy down the road. Overall, I'm glad I did it, especially for less than $200 in just a couple hours of time. It should completely transform how the car handles at the limit, so I'm really excited to try it out and see how it does. Of course, I will update you guys at an autocross event or a track day once I kind of figure out how well it works. But based on all the research I've done and just knowing how front-wheel drive cars work, I would definitely recommend this. It was not nearly as bad as I expected. I'm not sure exactly how this ST bar stacks up against competing bars, but I know that ST suspension is the budget version of KW suspension, and that is a brand that I definitely trust. They have a great reputation. But like I said, I will update you guys on how I like the bar once we get out and actually get to use it. So if you have any questions, of course, drop those below, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys next week.